Okay, can I have your attention? We'll get started. There are some handouts for the home networking, I think on the back table or one of the tables there. Our main topic today is going to be home networking, and it'll be presented by myself, Tom Kreuzer. The agenda, before we get to the main topic, we'll talk about some of the club stuff first. Future meetings, we do have a meeting scheduled for April 17th, and that'll be back here in the Baltic room, and it'll be on viruses and security, and I'll be presenting that one also. We'll have a free sandwich lunch, so that usually packs them in, so we'll have food and pop there for everyone. And we'll talk about antivirus and anti-spyware software, password managers, and then some tools and tips to keep you safe. We also do have a Macintosh SIG. It's a Mac SIG, but it's really an Apple SIG. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac, you're welcome to go to that meeting too. That's April 19th. The next one is April 19th. Our officers, our president is Jim Holman there. Linda Brown is our vice president. She was up here a few minutes ago, but she had to leave. Paul Ebert is our membership secretary. I don't see Paul here. Mike Griffin is our treasurer and MacSig. Stan Miller is our secretary. Let's see Stan. Andrew Petrucci is our communication coordinator. And my name is Tom Kreuzer. I'm a director at large. Members old and new, you can pay your dues to Paul, and since Paul's in here, just drop them off with me or Jim there, and we'll get it to the right person. A reminder, if you're changing your email, to make sure and notify us so that we can keep in touch. We are currently making some changes to our membership roster. We used to keep a lot of information. Some of it had to do with the 3M ID, the 3M address, and the home address. Well, we're no longer going to be tracking that, so you won't see it, even though I think you filled out yours. This form has the addresses on there. We aren't going to need the addresses anymore. We're just going to be collecting the name, email, and a home phone number. And that home phone number, we're only using that if, for whatever reason, your email stops working. So if you change email, that's a way for us to get a hold of you to see what your new email is. And currently, I think Paul was saying that we have about 125 members. About 20 of the members we don't have a phone number for, so he'll be contacting those members asking for a phone number. And again, that reason is so that we can get you if your email stops working. And then we also track whether you're on the Macintosh SIG or not. Suggestions for topics, you can email your ideas for topics or talk to any of the board members. If you'd like to volunteer to present on any hardware or software that you're using, could be it's something at home or at work, that's great. Or if you want to write, we have a monthly eBytes newsletter. Could be a short 1 or 2 sentences or multiple pages. We'll publish it in our monthly newsletter. Website is where we do make available past meeting handouts and slides. And when we can, we record them. So like this one is being recorded, so that'll be available out there. You can always go back and look at old meetings and old handouts. We have a deals section, our monthly newsletter, and the URL is also listed on the handout in the back. Any club questions before we get to the main topic? Okay, our main topic today is home networking. I'll be presenting.
Actually,
yeah.
One extra comment is for the upcoming meeting, sandwich meeting, we could use a volunteer for getting the beverage.
Okay, Ed's volunteering again, so.
Oh, we did. I'm sorry, did I miss that? I'm sorry. Okay.
No, he just put up his hand. So he immediately volunteered, so if you want to coordinate with Ed then, and then we should be set there. Okay. Home networking. A strong home network is especially important as we enter the age of the Internet of Things, the IoT. We have so many things to connect together and share information. We no longer have just a single PC connected to the Ethernet. When this all started, all we had is a dial-up line or then the internet, the faster connection there. But now we have tablets, we have phones, we have TVs, we have lights, we have thermostats, security systems, and many other devices to connect. Poor Wi-Fi is the #1 cause of frustration in people's home for all these devices. They don't work, or they go in this room and they have a problem, or this isn't fast enough, or things like that. So let's talk about some of the basic components that you have in a home network there. And the first thing that you have in a home network is you have the internet itself, your connection to the internet. And this is from the last PC Club survey that we did back in the end of December of last year. And you can see here people that had 3G or 4G connections, 3% of the members had that. That's a cell phone hotspot type connection. Fiber optics, we've got 8%, DSL 26%, 58% for cable, dial-up, which I'm surprised we still have a few there, and then unknown 2%. Yeah. So the internet coming in here, then typically, well, not typically, it has to go to a thing called a modem, and then from the modem it goes to a router, and that router usually is a combination of wired and wireless. That gives you your Wi-Fi, and then from there it gets out to all your different devices that you have within the home, and that could be by wire or by wireless. But you have laptops, phones, printers, TVs, you name it. We're starting to connect everything there, and you're getting smart devices that connect in. Okay, digging a little deeper into our components, I mentioned a modem. So we have our internet connection, and then we have our modem. The modem converts the cable, the phone line, or the fiber optics into an Ethernet signal there, into the Ethernet and an Ethernet signal. From the modem, it then goes to the router. The router is a computer with a processor, so it's a full-fledged mini computer in there. Has a processor, has memory, has software. It takes the Ethernet and it outputs a Wi-Fi and usually multiple Ethernet connections. Sometimes you'll see a modem and a router combined into one device. So if you have like Xfinity leases a device called a gateway. That gateway is a combination modem and router, and those usually lease for $7 to $30 a month that you're paying for that. I do not recommend that you lease from your provider, be it Xfinity or Comcast or whatever your provider is. I recommend that you buy a separate modem and a separate router, and that'll end up saving you roughly $100 to $300 a year over leasing. Also, when you buy, you get exactly what you need. So if you need better coverage in the home, or you need a newer standard or stuff like that, you can get that. Whereas with the lease, you're kind of stuck with what your provider may be providing there. So you can end up paying less money and getting better performance when you buy your own and upgrade those when appropriate. If you are currently leasing, you can go out to your ISP or internet provider there. website, and they'll usually list, or all of them will list, the makes and models that they support that can be connected into their network. Then look at places like Amazon, eBay, or Craigslist, and you can find or purchase either used or new modems. Even stores like Best Buy and Target and that will have a small number of devices. They usually don't have all the different models and things like that, but they'll usually have at least a couple of devices that'll work with, let's say, a CenturyLink or a Comcast there. I list in here a link. This is a link to a PC Magazine article or website on how to get the best cable modem, and it also talks about buying versus renting there. As I mentioned before, if you're leasing your modem and router or a gateway device, don't lease it from your ISP. Buy it yourself, and you're going to save yourself money and get better equipment there. So we talked about a modem. So we have the internet, we have the coming into the modem, out of the modem we have Ethernet. Then we have a router. A router, unlike a modem, you can use any router with any ISP. So routers aren't specific to a cable, an Xfinity, or a DSL or a fiber optics. They'll work with Ethernet in and Wi-Fi and Ethernet out. That's the way a router works. A basic router, like what your ISP leases you, those are usually fairly cheap routers. Some of them as low as $25 or $50. They aren't high-end routers. Advanced routers can run anywhere from $100 to $500. Which router you need depends on what your needs are, and we'll talk about some of the needs. The biggest need is coverage. If you live in an apartment, a cheap router is going to work fine. If you live in a 3-story house, a cheap router is not going to be able to reach all 3 floors and have a good quality signal. Wi-Fi signals can reach as far as 300 feet if there's nothing in its path. But if you live in a house, you have walls, you have refrigerators, you have wiring, you have concrete blocks, you have stucco, you have all kinds of things in the path there, which can limit how far these Wi-Fi signals can go. And it could be as little as 10 feet. Another determining factor for what you need is what's the number of devices that you're going to be connecting, and what's the maximum bandwidth that these different devices need. So if you live by yourself and all you do is browse the internet, that's very low bandwidth and one device connected in. But if you live in a family of 5 and everybody's on there and they're all streaming different TV shows at the same time, then you need a lot more bandwidth. And the Wi-Fi has to contend with all these different connections. So even though you've got a fast connection, it's going to slow down because of all the other people connected and all the other devices. So when you're doing things like streaming and gaming and video and things, downloading large files and things like that, that can max out cheaper routers and that. Another consideration is the Wi-Fi standard, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on the different numbers and what they mean. But you also have some features like dual band. Dual band just means that instead of just one connection, you essentially have 2 paths, which can double the speed. So if you're having trouble with your Netflix buffering and being slow, having a dual band router and a dual band device that can connect to it can increase that. Or there's even tri-band, or MU-MU-MO, which is multiple connections. That's another way to increase the speed. Another feature is beamforming. Instead of an antenna that sends stuff out 360 degrees out all around. Beamforming means that it concentrates the signal in a certain direction. So you can point it towards a particular area and not cause interference possibly to other areas or be wasting signals going there. Some of the routers do support USB ports for a printer or a USB drive. And there's other features also. I mentioned here there's no reason to pay for features that you are not likely to use. So if you don't have devices that take advantage of some of this stuff or problems that you're trying to address, you don't have to buy the most expensive router because chances are you're not going to use the features that are in there. If you currently have problems in your house with dead zones, could be due to walls, steel objects, electronic interference, bricks, concrete, and other factors, they'll all interrupt or weaken your signal. So the more expensive routers do a better job of coverage and quality there. Some of them also do have removable or directional antennas that can be aimed and pointed in certain areas. So you may have some antennas pointed in this and some antennas pointed in that. That's why you see multiple antennas and things like that. Some of the routers also support a separate guest network. So if you do have a situation where you have people come over, instead of giving them access to your home network with your password, you can set up a separate guest network and kind of isolate them on what they can do and that. Yes. Yeah, I mean the password, but usually you use a simpler password and different from your home network there, because that way somebody couldn't broadcast it or act. If they leaked it, it wouldn't be interfering with your network. It would be the capability of getting into your guest network, but you could change that. It depends on what your problem is, and we'll talk about some of the tools that you can use to see how strong your signal is. Whether just pointing it or moving it or putting it higher in a room or stuff like that, you'd be surprised at how much that can change the strength and quality of the signal that you're getting. So unfortunately, there isn't one answer that says this router will do everything for everybody. It doesn't work that way. It's almost a trial and error to see what you get there. Okay? Yes?
Regular LAN network is still better than Wi-Fi.
Yes, an Ethernet connection, if you can run an Ethernet connection, that's your best connection. It's going to be the fastest. Well, what you have, what a router does, like I mentioned earlier, is a router can take one connection, convert it into 4, 8 Ethernet connections out. That router is typically rated at a certain throughput. That throughput may be 100 megabytes, maybe a gigabyte. Whatever that router is rated for is what you should be getting in total throughput through there. So as long as, but if I bought, let's say I had a 100 megabyte internet coming in, and I put in a router that's only capable of 10 megabytes per second, all of a sudden that's the throttle point, and everything, that's 10 megabytes for everything going in there, whether it's Wi-Fi or it's Ethernet going in there. And that's why these routers cost more money that are faster in that, because they have faster processors. Well, a faster processor costs more than a slower processor. So when you have processors and memory and that, which is what these routers are, that's why the faster ones and the more sophisticated do cost more money. Okay?
We moved into a new building that was just constructed, it's a 30-story building, and in every unit, they have, modem set up for either CenturyLink or Comcast. And so, for 1 gig, pay $79 a month, and, whatever. I mean, are you suggesting that I should still put a router to that? Because isn't the router already included in that?
It all depends there at what your options are for your internet. With that $79, it sounds like what they may be covering is they may be covering the lease of a modem router, and they may not give you an option of doing anything. You'd still have to have that.
I think the option is going to 1 gig or less than that, less money, 1 gig.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is more where you do have options in terms of, you know, I have fiber optics coming into my house. I pay for 40 megabyte per second service. That's all I need. But instead of paying the $65, $75, $100 for gigabyte service, I'm paying, well, I had 2 years at $29.95. So now it's going up because, again, there's introductory prices and then there's other. But even after the introductory prices, I just called them up and negotiated with them, and I got it for, I think, what is it, $41 or $42 a month for lifetime. But obviously, as my needs change and I need faster speed, I'm going to change and need more speed. But at this time, you know, people think, well, it's not that much different. Why don't I get gigabyte for $75 or $65 instead of paying $40? Well, that's $20 a month. Multiply that by 12, $250. Who doesn't want an extra $250 a year? 4 years, that's $1,000. I put it towards your retirement. You know, I mean, yeah, right. Yeah.
Get that nicer TV.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on. Okay, one of the other things that you can do with routers is a thing called quality of service, QoS. And QoS, because this is a microcomputer, there's all kinds of options and all kinds of things that you can do on it. One of the things you can do is you can set the priority. So if you're having trouble with Netflix buffering or being slow, you can set the priority for Netflix streaming as number 1, and then everything else would be less. That way the computer in there gives priority to Netflix. It doesn't give it go through one at a time. Gee, I've got 20 things connected. I'm going to go through all 20 things and then get back to Netflix, and then go through the 20 and then get back to Netflix and things like that. So that you can change that very easily by setting this quality of service. Some of the routers in that, you also have a thing called Internet Protocol version. Currently we're on version 4, but that is currently being replaced with IPv6. The IPv6 is needed because we're running out of internet addresses. With all these devices, yeah, there has to be longer addresses, similar to telephone numbers and things like that. You can't just keep adding because we have more phones than we have numbers, and that's the way the internet is. If I'm going to have 20 or 50 or 100 devices in my home, that's different than when I had one device in my home. And here I list a link to the PC Magazine for the best routers. And you can see in here, this is from the page here, prices here go from $59, and that's an editor's choice, but it's for budget buyers, all the way up to, I think, $377. You can see they vary in the number of antennas, and again, some of these are more directional, but they can be moved and pointed horizontally, vertically, and make sure they're covering stuff in the right direction there. But you can go out to this site and you can get more information on what's out there. I mentioned the important thing is the Wi-Fi standard. And Wi-Fi standard is that funny looking number that you'll see listed, 802.11. And it has changed and improved vastly over the years. Most routers, or all routers, are backwardly compatible to old standards. So if you buy a new router that's the most current standard, it supports devices that maybe 10 years old or 15 years old will still be able to connect to the old standard. You can do that. In our survey, our PC Club survey, we asked what people currently had. And what people currently have, I mentioned here, they should have it on 802.11 AC. And you can see from the survey here, first off, this is very, very disturbing, is 30% of the people didn't know what they had, which probably means they might be leasing but even if you're leasing, you should know what you have, because your internet provider could be keeping you with an old gateway or router there that may be 5 years old, and you could be getting much faster speeds and much better quality and much better security if it was a newer device there. 802.11 AC, 26% of the people said they had that. N, which is the next step back, 21% had. G, 10% had. B, 2%, and none, meaning they don't have a home network, 13%. I'm surprised that number is there, because usually, with the price of tablets, I can buy a tablet for $29 now. Well, it's awful handy to have a tablet, do searches, check my mail, phone, whatever. So I don't know how people can get by without a home network. And especially you can put in a home network with some of these cheaper routers for $20. So it's not a big expense.
But you have to have cable, right?
Well, but no, could be anything. If I have dial-up, I could end up putting using that and broadcasting that to the rest of the house. You'd have to first dial up, and then other devices could connect. But if you have any type of connection, you can then set up your home network. A home network, I could set up a home network without any internet at all, and I could just have my home devices talking to each other. Yes.
I'm pretty sure I have AC, but I didn't know for sure. So how do I find out what I got?
Yeah, to find out what you've got, usually the easiest way is this. Just turn it over, and it'll say, and it'll have a whole bunch of information. Some of this information we'll get to a little bit later on how to connect to it and the admin name and things like that. That's usually all on the router itself. If you don't see it on the router, I mean, I've seen 90% of it. It's on the router. If it's not, you'll at least have a model number. Just Google the model number, and then you'll get the specs. That model number, specs, and then you'll get what it is there. And that can be a little more difficult with the gateways, which are the combination, but it is one of these standards it's set to. You're welcome. If you have an older standard like N or G or B or that, you want to make sure that you get a new router. It'll provide you more speed, better security. Now, if you're buying a new router, I said your current router should be AC. Well, this year you're starting to see new ones come out, 802.11ax. Now, because these numbers have been so confusing to people, so, these numbers from B to G to N to AC, and actually there's all kinds of letters in between there too, are confusing to people. The industry is also starting to call it by a number. It's calling it this new standard, 802.11ax. It's calling that Wi-Fi 6. And you're going to start seeing that on boxes and in marketing and stuff like that, saying whether your phone is capable of connecting in Wi-Fi 6 and your router is capable of connecting in Wi-Fi 6. You'll start seeing those devices in 2019.
Are they out now? Or?
Some of them are, yes. You pay a premium. So if you're buying now, would I recommend that you look for something with AX? No. Buy an AC. In 2, 3, 4 years, upgrade to the Wi-Fi 6. So unless you really need some of the capabilities, and this you can see, these are the most commonly used 802.11a, B, G, N, AC, and now we're going to have X. This is the year they came out, 97. So you can see anywhere from 3 years to 5 years between new versions. The speeds have increased each time. The frequencies, you've gotten more frequencies that are there, and then you've gotten more streams, and the streams is just the number of connections that will be supported there. Yes? I'll be talking about mesh networks in a second there, but a mesh could be to this standard, or could be to the Wi-Fi 6 standard, could be to the Wi-Fi 5 standard. It has to be to one of those standards. It's a mesh system is a router. It's a complex router. That's all it is. Yes, Ed.
You only list 5 gig of AC, the backward compatibles, are they AC and or something like that, or AC, or?
There's all kinds of variations, but I guess what was the comment there, Ed?
Well,
or
if you find a router that just lists itself as an AC router, your chart says that it's 5 gig only, got lots of devices from prior times.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yes. So if you're going 2.4 gig, it's connected at the end.
So the ACs have an end built in.
Yeah, and there also are differences too, where I mentioned some of these speeds in here. If you look at an individual router, it may claim a higher or a lower speed because of the technology, the CPU that it has, and the technology. That's where you start getting into the dual band and the tri-band, and those are in addition to the streams here. So some routers will claim, if you're a real gamer and you want, the fastest and stuff like that, there's routers that'll allow for the multiple connections and the multiple streams and have a proprietary way of transferring data, which increases the speed. But in general, this is kind of from like a Wikipedia or that on what's available. Yes.
Should you turn your router off periodically to clear it?
Yes, and I'll mention it in a little bit there.
You said that the routers have a memory. So if you are upgrading your router and you want to get rid of your old one, is there any information you're concerned that's in that memory?
Yeah, all the routers, if you look at all routers, you usually have your Ethernet ports. This has a USB port, it has power button, and then this is where the power comes in here. You'll see a little button here called reset. Pushing that button does a factory reset. So any of your passwords, your home network passwords, your name of your network, things like that, if I push this while it's turned on, it's reset to the factory settings. None of your information is on there. Yes, you can. That's why you don't. That's it. If you've ever been to 3M, 3M keeps all the stuff locked up in a closet. They don't let it. They don't have it out in the open because the disgruntled employee or anybody could go by and reset, and then somebody would have to spend a lot of time resetting stuff back up. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about spatial screens and why it's important to run
Yeah, and that kind of gets to in here as in the last AC and AX, you had the streams there, and so prior to that, a device. If I was hooking my laptop up to the internet, I was limited to one connection. So there'd be one connection between here, the router, and essentially the internet. With these new standards, and if your device supports it, I could have multiple connections, each getting 1 gigabyte. So let's say I had gigabyte internet up here. I could be running one game on here that is consuming 1 gigabyte going up there. I could have another completely separate application or game getting its own stream up there. It's not competing with the other one. So it's like taking a garden hose and having multiple streams come down instead of just one stream coming down. And all those streams could go whatever the maximum is.
So for example, the AC, your max data rate is 3.5 gigabits per second. You have 4 streams. Don't you have to share that 3.5 full with?
Yes, you do, but the limitations that you have, this is, it gets very complex. So when we talk about maximum data rate here, these are megabits per second. Bits are zeros and ones. That's not a letter. It's not a number. A letter or a number takes 8 bits. Then you put on the transport. Where's it going to? Where's it coming from? How big a package is? Your actual throughput of the number of bytes is about divide by 10 or more there. That's for all connections. Now, if I'm doing 4K video isn't consuming 1 gigabyte. There's nothing that's consuming a total of 1 gigabyte there. So I don't want to go, I don't have time to go into detail there, but there's a lot of overhead in Wi-Fi in doing packets, sending it, because every time something gets sent to a router over Wi-Fi, there has to be an acknowledgement sent back. And if there's any problem, then this resends it. And then this has to acknowledge back. And all that's happening from here all the way to the servers that you're connected to and everything like that. And if that server is halfway around the world, you have latency. Electricity can only travel so fast. And we think it's, unlimited, but guess what? It's about a 5-second delay for me to go from here to over to Paris. And the laws of nature will not change how fast that data can get there. But we'll move on. We can talk later if you want. Wi-Fi 6 supports a larger number of these streams. The multiple, that MU-MIMO, that's multiple user, multiple input, multiple output within one device. So it's within one device, you have multiple input, multiple output, as long as it supports it there. 8 streams. Probably the most important for people is this last one, better battery life for smart home devices. So it's going to support something called target wake-up time. Right now, your router, when you get a connection, it's constantly pinging back to that device to say, are you still there? So if it's not getting any requests from it or anything like that, it sends a signal back and says, are you still there? Are you still there? Are you still awake? And if it doesn't respond, it gets rid of that address and no longer allows that connection. Then if this wakes up a half an hour later and wants to connect, it has to go through all of the deal to reauthorize, to reconnect, to put a request back in. So that works fine for PCs. It doesn't work for an outdoor video camera that you're trying to run on battery. You want to minimize the amount of electricity. You only need it to broadcast at certain times. Well, that's what this accomplishes. So as we start putting devices into all these other devices, we don't want to be consuming a lot of electricity, and all of that check to see whether you're still there. Again, that's fine if you've got one device on your home network or 2 devices, but now every outlet is a smart outlet. Every light is a smart light. Every refrigerator, every appliance in there, your heater, your water heater, you could potentially have hundreds of devices in your house all sending signals and communicating with each other. And so you want to minimize that traffic. Otherwise, your network's just going to be bogged down checking to see if everything's still there. So this is an important change there. Okay, so that's the standards and what's going on there. Because people have problems with dead zones and things like that, there are things. One of them is called installing a range extender or repeater, and you can buy those for $20 to $200. That can fix a problem that you might be having with your quality and coverage. You plug a range extender into an electrical socket at the outer range of your existing router's coverage, and it catches the signal and then repeats it. The rebroadcasted signal is typically half the strength and half the speed of what you got from your main router. And they create a separate network, which means that you don't have seamless roaming throughout your house. When you go, let's say you had a problem on the 3rd floor, you put in one of these extenders to give you access up on the 3rd floor. Well, as you go from floor to floor, what's going to happen, like with my phone, is my phone's going to connect on the 1st floor. As I move up and I lose that connection to the 1st floor router, then it's going to have to connect to the 3rd floor router there. So at some point you're going to be kind of disconnected, and it's going to be connecting between there. It is seamless from the standpoint that I didn't have to do anything on my phone, but I didn't have seamless connectivity just walking up the stairs and doing stuff. If you can't connect extenders, some of them can be connected by Ethernet or power line. So if your house is not wired, or you can run it up a laundry chute or things like that, running an Ethernet can be a solution there. Running that up to the 3rd floor and putting what's called an access point. Or a power line. Power line, if you've seen those, they're a device that you hook in near your main router into the power line, and then it uses the power line within your house kind of as an Ethernet cable. So on the other end, you hook another power line device, and it used your internal wiring as an Ethernet connection to connect those. So some people who have problems with their streaming service, buffering a lot or having problems, they'll put in a power line extender that way.
You need Modem, the router to also have a power line feature?
You have where your main router comes in, you have a power line device where an Ethernet goes to that power line device, and then let's say this is up on the 2nd floor for my TV. I have another power line device there, and I have an Ethernet coming out of there to the deal. So you need 2 devices. It takes it in, transfers it, uses the wiring, and then decodes it and comes out.
So it uses one of your fixed Ethernet connections off the router.
Yes, it does use you can get wireless, but that would be silly. You'd only be slowing it down. Usually you're putting it in because you have a problem with speed, and you want to get the maximum speed that you can get. Okay. Yes, it can work anywhere. Yeah. And the only limitation there that I've run into, because I've helped a couple of people. My nephews have put in the power line out to the garage and to other places. Is your house can't be separately wired, meaning if they're all going into one main box, great. But if you have one box here and a meter and another box here and a meter, it's not going to work because It goes into the power line, but guess what? This power line never gets connected to this other there, and it's usually done by ground. It's using the ground and other things, so it's it works great within a single environment there. Okay. When you buy these devices, I mentioned here, they do come with certain standards. So if you're getting Wi-Fi, don't buy an 802.11 extender if your router is an 802.11 AC. Just because if you wanted an AC, then buy an AC extender there too. Because otherwise, yes, this is an AC signal here, but if this extender only supports N, this computer is only going to be able to connect by N here. Okay. And I list the PC Magazine has a little write-up on extenders. Okay.
Why did you get an extender if you're going to have rather than the router?
You have to have a main router, and your main router is not getting to a certain room.
Oh, you're saying,
That's what extenders are for. So if your main router works fine and you don't have any dead spots and upstairs, downstairs, you're not having any problems, great. That's the ideal. But a lot of people, especially in bigger homes, have problems or things like that. Okay. Home mesh networks. So the question was asked about mesh networks. They came out about 3 years ago. They're the latest routers. They provide coverage to a medium-sized house, or I mean the latest routers that we talked about provide coverage to about a medium-sized house. If you have a large 3-story house, one router is not going to do it. It's not going to be able to service all 3 floors. You're going to have problems in some of the rooms or in some stuff. So for a larger house or dwellings with dense walls, multiple floors, metal and concrete substructures, or other structural impediments, that's where home mesh networks come in. And they're an alternative to the repeaters and that we just talked about, or range extenders. Range extenders do a good job of filling in some of the dead zones, but because they only provide half the bandwidth that you get from your main router. And it slows down your main router because in order to repeat that, guess what? Like we talked about, this has to send the signal to the repeater has to get it, rebroadcast it to the original one, the original router then has to send it out. Well, all those steps slow down your connection and what you're going to get there. And because there's interference and things like that between the two, it slows everything down for everybody, not just the device that is trying to connect. I mentioned here access points. Access points offer more bandwidth than range extenders, but require a wired connection to the main router. Both solutions typically create a new network SSID that you have to log into as you move from one area to another. And we'll talk a little bit about access points a little bit later there. Home mesh network can eliminate this by drawing upon multiple units spread throughout the house. Mesh networks cost from $130 up to $500 and usually come with a base unit plus 1 or 2 extender units. You can buy additional extender units for $70 to $250. Each unit is placed roughly 30 to 50 feet from the last, 1 or 2 rooms apart, and you start placing them around the house and where you have problems there. The units are very easy to set up and use, but what you're paying for, there is a cost. Let's say you put in 3 of them, 3 units in that, you may be paying $500. Well, that $500 you're paying for is the convenience of setting it up because the mesh units kind of automatically set themselves up. It's not for better or higher quality Wi-Fi. So don't buy it if you want fast Wi-Fi or things like that. They're a simple solution to simple low volume problems that you may have. and here's a link to some of the information there. I mentioned the best alternative to a mesh network is to run Ethernet cables, network cables to parts of the home. And then you have one main router, and then you have these internet legs going off, and then you put another router at the end of this leg, and routers can be set up at what's called an access point, which is different than the way a router is normally configured. Access point makes it part of the network, so you don't have a separate name of the network. You don't have to log in. It shares the same password, shares the same thing. That's what you see at 3M. If you're a 3M employee and you're able to walk around the building and it doesn't disconnect, it doesn't do things, you just automatically can kind of move, and as long as it's got a signal, you'll be connected, and it doesn't use a different password, doesn't have a different name, and that's called access point. And all of these routers, or even the cheap ones, this could be set up as an access point instead of a main router. The trouble there is, when I set it up, or you'd set it up with an Ethernet cable, and a lot of people can't run Ethernet to every place that they'd like to. And so that's the challenge there. But setting up these access points and that is the best way to give you the lowest cost and the fastest performance. So if you hire a firm to come in and wire your house, that's what they'll do. They won't put in if they say our solution is to put in a mesh network, look at them and kind of laugh, because they obviously don't know what they're doing. Any reputable place is going to say, we're going to put in a main router and access points throughout the house there. It's going to cost you, because you may be spending $2,000 to get Ethernet run and stuff like that to these other areas. The routers themselves are a small part of the cost. It's getting the infrastructure to the rest of the building there. Okay, router setup. I mentioned here, instead of paying the Geek Squad or Xfinity between $100 and $300 for setting up your Wi-Fi, you should set it up, and I should take off recommend. You must set it up yourself. You don't want to be paying anybody to do this. Setup is easy. Then you'll be able to make future changes and upgrades. Changing your router, you want to change your router setting. Don't just buy it and plug it in and all of a sudden you go, well, my phone can connect to it. You don't want that, because that means it's using the default settings, and a hacker or your neighbors or anybody could connect in here using the default settings, or at least get into the admin screens and make changes. I mentioned here to download, skim the manual for the router. Typically, to change a router, to get into the admin screen to change the settings, you use a browser, and that can be from a PC or from a mobile device, and you connect to it by putting in the IP address. The changes that I recommend making take less than 5 minutes to set up, so it's no great deal of time, and again, why pay Xfinity or the Geek Squad $300 for 5 minutes of setting and connecting your devices there. So these are the settings that I recommend changing on your router. There's a default password set up for an admin account to connect, because I mentioned this is a computer and it's running software. You can connect to this and you log into it. Well, you want to change that password that's used to log into it. Use a strong password. The other thing is, by default, all these devices have what's called remote admin access. And you want to turn that off. What that's used for is that's used for somebody outside of your home network to be able to log into this device and make changes. And that's handy if you are having Geek Squad connect in and make changes from their location. Then they need that on. But what you're also doing is you're saying, okay, if somebody in China wants to attempt to connect in and make changes to my router, I'm going to let them, as long as if they can hack in, they can have access. But turning this off means that they won't be able to connect into your router. Change the default network name. That's known as the SSID. So if you've seen strange names of networks when you're trying to connect to stuff, that's everybody can, when you set up a router, you can decide on the name. You can use the name of your dog. You can use a family name. You can use whatever you want, but find something that makes sense to you, and you can actually, in a lot of the routers, you can use the same name for the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz network. So keep them the same if possible. If not, just add 2, 4, or 5 onto the end of the name to differentiate the two networks from each other. You can use the same one on the new router. So yeah, the password that you set up is an admin password to change this. So if I have multiple access points or multiple devices or things like that, each one has can have a different password or could have the same password if you wanted to use the same one within your home network. Okay. I mentioned here many routers use a default channel to broadcast their signal out. It's kind of like the old days of the CB radio or a walkie-talkie. If you're on the same channel, there's interference, multiple people talking at the same time, and that'll slow down your connection and cause quality problems. Switching to a different channel can eliminate the problem. I'll talk a little bit about an app and some software to help you. And some of the routers also have an option called auto, where it'll attempt to find the best channel to use. But it's always good to check that yourself. Here I show just a startup screen. So I went into a browser, typed in this address, 192.168.0.1. It's listed on the back of the router here. This is what you connect to. Go into the browser. It's going to prompt me for the admin password. I put in the admin password. In this case, the default admin password for this device is blank. So whoever gets in here first gets to change it. But this is an example of the screen. You have numerous settings in here. You usually have a wizard that you can use that'll step you through some of the settings there. Otherwise, you can go in and manually change the things that we talked about there. But it's very easy to make the changes to the name, to the password, to all these things that we talked about. I mentioned here you want to make sure that WPA2 is turned on. By default, it usually is. That's the security package that it's using there, encryption. And assign a strong password to your home network. Keep the firmware updated. I mentioned that this is a little mini computer. Well, being a mini computer, it has software that's loaded onto chips in here. You don't have a hard drive, but you do have chips in here, and you want to keep that software updated. Some of those updates are done automatically or can be scheduled to be done automatically. Others, you have to go into the admin screen and you have to manually update it to a new version. I mentioned label all the wires and document what the lights look like on your modem and your router when things are okay, and with these settings that you set up on your network. So this is an example here. This is my own modem and router. And this is a modem, a CenturyLink modem. It has fiber optics in, has an Ethernet coming out. And you can see here I have a little piece of paper that I've taped to the side of it with all the lights here. And it mentions when it's functioning correctly, this is what the lights look like. They're either solid or they're blinking or they're not on at all. Just document what they look like. And this is down in my laundry room in the basement where the line comes in. This is up on my first floor in a closet. I I have the cables coming in. You can see I've labeled my cables. I've used 3M wire ties to keep it nice and clean, so there aren't just wires going all over the place. I have my piece of paper here with all the lights. Again, list what the lights look like when everything's okay. And then I have listed information like when I purchased it, the model number, the accounts, and the passwords that I set up, the SSID and everything there. So it's just a good idea. This will save you tons of time in the long run, or if your internet stops working, you can just quickly go down. I can go down and look at my router or look in the basement at my modem, and I can say, oh, it appears to be functioning fine, or this is fine here.
When someone sends you a survey, you can fill it out really fast.
Yes. Yep. Don't have to put the question mark for what's out there. Mention here, place the router where you have the best signal to reach all your devices, located as high as possible in a central area. Don't put the router next to a metal desk, a fridge, mirrors, TV, or other objects. Some people will stick it underneath their desk, and then they wonder why they aren't getting a good signal in the living room or somewhere else. Well, you'll see here. You can use Wi-Fi Analyzer and this Insider to check there. If you have antennas, try pointing them, and in some cases you can do it. So this is actually a layout of my house here, and I have my fiber optics coming in, comes into the basement, into my laundry room. That's where my modem is. So that fiber optics to Ethernet is here. Can you guess where my closet is located? Yeah, right here in the middle. I've got power in here, and I can actually access this from my basement here. So I could run an Ethernet very easily from here to here. So that's where I put my Wi-Fi is, and I put my Wi-Fi at the very top of the closet. So it's up, you want it up as high as it can go and centrally located. This is how it's centrally located. I also ran additional Ethernet off of there, so I did have 4 Ethernet. I ran 2 to my front, to my living room. That's for my Apple TV, and I have a DVR that also works better with a connection there. And then I have 2 going to my back den that I can use for a laptop, my laptop and my desktop and that. Yes?
Would it be useful if you got a hard time running the stuff that are on one line of the switch instead?
You could do that. You can. What Ed's talking about with the switch is it's similar to a router. They can, where you want to have more Ethernet lines, you could do that. Some people will. I actually, before I had this set up, I had one line going up here, and then I had a separate Wi-Fi router here because my Wi-Fi used to be back here. I used to have my PC like most people. You had your. This is where I had the line set up, and this is where I had it. And obviously, I wasn't getting a good signal up here, so I ran an Ethernet from here to here, put a router in here, and then I had separate Wi-Fi here. But I didn't have that transparency of one network there. And so if you're doing things like Chromecast and casting stuff and things like that, it's handier if you have one network instead of multiple networks. Okay, I mentioned tools. One of the tools is Insider. It's free software for Windows, but you can load it on a laptop, which is what I have it on here. You can use it to verify your network, how it's set up. You can find locations of poor coverage in your house. You can detect other networks that might be causing you interference, and it'll help you aim your antennas and position. And this is what it looks like. So this is a demo here I did a few years ago here at 3M. But you can see you end up with a lot of different networks, and you'd be surprised at home. I think near me, I'm picking up like 16 or 17 networks. And you have separate networks for the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz range. It'll tell you what security is being used, what the router is if it's an 802.11n or an AC or what it is, and the maximum rate and what's going on. So it's a nice little tool. Wi-Fi Analyzer is an app. I use it on my Android phone. It'll give me almost all the same information. Shows me the networks, shows me what frequency they're on the channel, the quality of the signal, what security is being used. It'll also has a tab to recommend the best channel. So if you're switching channels, it'll recommend instead of using 10 or 1 here, you'd be best to use 8. 8 would be your best bet there. So it'll help you set your channels if you want. Other tips, reboot or restart your router. Because it's a computer, restart it regularly, once a month or at least once a quarter. Now, restarting it is different than resetting it. You don't want to push the button to reset it or you lose all your settings. To restart it, you can either use that admin app, all of them have a restart option in there, or if it's in the closet, go in, unplug it, and plug it back in. You know, wait a few seconds and plug it back in. The other thing, if you do have a smart plug, programmable smart plug, put one on there, program it once a month, 3 o'clock in the morning, shut down and turn itself back on. That'll restart it. Yep. Well, the only downside is if you wanted to use it, you know, then you have to turn it on, and then once you turn it on, it can take a minute or 2 minutes maybe to come fully up and get all its connections back. So, well, with any electronics, they'll tell you that the hardest thing on the electronics is the burst on and off. So obviously, you know, but these, if you're just looking to get 3 years or 5 years out of it, you shouldn't have any problem at all. If you're going to try and get 20 years out of it, then so restart them. I recommend here buying a new router at least every 5 years to take advantage of the speed, the quality, the security, the new standards that come out there. Some routers support a second guest network. I don't recommend turning that on unless you really do have guests. You know, if you just have family, well, you trust your family. You could probably give them the password, but so most people don't need a separate guest network. Settings that there are additional settings that you can do on all these routers where if you have kids, you can limit their access to certain days or certain times. So if you don't want them on the internet at between 12 at night and 8 in the morning, I can go in here and I can program this and they'll never get access between those hours. And you can limit it by what's called a MAC ID, which is the device, if they have a phone or they have a laptop or stuff like that, or there's numerous ways that you can do it. But it's relatively easy to do and very effective. I mentioned here 5 gigahertz offers faster speeds, but it doesn't handle obstructions quite as well as 2.4 gigahertz. So some people figure, oh, I'm going to connect on 5 gigahertz and that's got to be better than 2.4. But if you're having connection problems, try the 2.4 gigahertz network and see if you don't get better reception using that in some locations further away from the router there. Test them. Yes?
What if your smart things only run on 2.4?
Yes, and that's a good point. Some of the devices only run on 2.4. Some of the devices only run on some of the old standards. When you set this up in the admin, you can actually pick, if you knew that you had no devices running on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz was fine, you could shut down the 2.4 gigahertz broadcast. That would speed up everything in your home network because, again, the more networks that you have, the more protocols that you're supporting, the slower the data passing in and out of your router is going to be. So if you know that you only have certain devices, you can turn parts on and off. Kind of going along with that, if you currently have Xfinity as your provider and you have one of their wonderful modems, you may not know that by default, all of the Xfinity modems create a second Wi-Fi network called Xfinity Wi-Fi. That's open for all Xfinity customers. So if you have it at your house, I can walk out on the street in front of your house and I can connect into your router and use your bandwidth to go out, and you don't even know that I'm connecting there. So they say that's a feature and they don't tell people, but you can go in and you can turn that off if you do have it. And if you, but again, I don't recommend that you have their routers. I don't recommend that you use their service. I recommend that you have your own modem, your own routers, and do your own setup. So you'd have complete control over what networks are set up and what's available.
So,
Yes.
if you're not going to use their, the other thing is a phone connection.
You can,
If you do that, you switch to your own.
you can, what you can do there if you want, the question was, you have Xfinity and you have phone service through them too. First off, I'd say 99.9% of the people don't need phone service from Xfinity. You can get it cheaper, and all you need is an internet connection, and you can use services like Magic Jack or Molu, or there's about 6 voice over IP services that are going to be cheaper than Xfinity or currently Magic Jack is, if you buy the device is $29.95. That's for the entire year. You get 12 months of service, unlimited service. All you do is connect that to the internet there, and then it does voice over IP. It's $23 a year after that. So there are options there. But if you do want to keep their service, you can buy a modem that is both an internet modem and a phone modem. And if you look in the back of your device there, if you bought that same device, all you'd have to do is take an Ethernet out there, hook it to your router, and then set up your home network with your router. So you don't have to use the router that comes in.
That part of it.
Yeah. Right. No, there's VoIP but you're right. I have yet to see a voice a phone without a modem in it. You can't just buy that. This I mentioned the future. I've just got a couple more slides. I know I'm over here. The 5G, your phones have progressed from 3G to 4G. 5G is starting to come out now, and that's probably going to be the hub of the future. So can 5G replace your cable or DSL or fiber optics that gives you that internet connection? And the simple answer is yes. There's not going to be a problem there. We still have to see what the devices and the plans will cost. This is an example, came out at the end of February, Sprint device, and because 5G supports gigabyte type connections there, it will be able to support streaming in your house and large volumes of data. The question is, what are the costs going to be? Certainly initially the costs are going to be high, but hopefully in a year, 2 years, both the devices and the costs are going to come down to where they're going to possibly replace the Xfinities and the CenturyLink as your connection to the internet. Yes? Yes, because as long as you've got a 5G connection, essentially, it's this device has kind of the mobile phone in there. It's connecting to the 5G network. That's connecting you to the internet, and you have gigabyte service between that and all the devices. This device from Sprint it's like a mobile hotspot, supports up to 20 devices connected to it, has an Ethernet cable out the back that you can plug in, and so you could connect this to your home router, or if this was sufficient for your small apartment, you wouldn't have to do anything. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if you do have any questions, you can stop up or send me an email or that, but thanks for coming. 1 second here.